Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're going to get started in just a moment. We're going to give attendees a few moments to fill in the room, and we'll be ready to go in, again, just a few moments. Thank you.
Alan, could you please promote Dana White?
Yes. I see a Dana Levenberg.
That's a different Dana.
Dana White.
Yeah, I heard you say Dana White. I'm just wondering if Dana came in under a different name.
It doesn't look like she's on
I
yet.
don't see a Dana White yet, so that's why I was trying to confirm.
Yeah, she's not on yet.
For those of you just joining, thank you for spending some time with us this evening. We're going to get started in just a moment. We're going to give attendees a few more seconds to fill in the room, and we'll get started momentarily. Thank you. Okay, our attendee count is starting to level out.
Alan, she should be there under D White.
I do not see an attendee with the name D White.
I don't either yet.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
For those of you who have recently joined, thanks so much. We're going to give it just another minute or so. Our attendee count is leveling off. Okay, we are nearing steady state. However, if you want to wait until D White joins, we can do that, or we can do whatever you all
She's
like.
going to be joining momentarily, so please keep an eye out for her and then bring her over as soon as she's there. But I think it would be good to get started because she's well versed in the rest of this information. Okay, so but just please keep an eye out for her.
You got it. All right, so with that, I believe I'm going to hand it over to Catherine or Christy to kind of kick us off.
That's right. Yes. Thank you so much, Alan. Welcome everyone to the first community meeting for the Village of Ossining Downtown Revitalization Initiative. We're really looking forward to speaking with you this evening. We apologize for getting started a bit late, but we are glad that we've got a good group with us to discuss the DRI program and how we're going to, over the course of the next 6 months or so, develop a strategic investment plan for the Village of Ossining. I wanted to flag that you joined this Zoom webinar through the virtual meeting room. The virtual meeting room will remain open during this meeting and through the end of the week. So you have the option to join the virtual meeting room, peruse those boards and slideshows at your leisure, and leave written feedback. We are also pleased to offer this opportunity to be speaking live in real time and walking through materials together and answering questions. I wanted to let folks know that Spanish translation services are available at this evening's meeting. In order to access the Spanish language channel, please click on the globe above interpretation on your Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen. You can see a screenshot here. And I'm going to pause so that Liz, one of our translators for this evening, can share this message in Spanish.
Buenas tardes a todos, soy la traductora. Si usted requiere interpretación o traducción al español, por favor, hazle clic o haga clic al botón en su pantalla que tiene el globito y dice interpretación. Y así se puede escuchar la reunión de esta noche en español. Muchas gracias.
Great. Thank you so much, Liz. All right, moving ahead. I will now turn it over to Mayor Rika Levin and Dr. Marcia Gordon, who are the co-chairs of the local planning committee, to welcome folks this evening. Mayor Levin, would you like to start?
That'll be great. Hello, folks. So happy to be here with everyone tonight. And I'm going to make up for a few of the lost minutes by keeping this very short and sweet. This is a sweet moment for Ossining. We are honored to have so many experts from the state level, our own staff, professionals and expert, my co-chair who has been involved with DRIs in other communities and is really one of the most knowledgeable people about economic development in the county of Westchester. For a number of years, she'll introduce herself as well, and I will let Dr. Marcia Gordon do that. The purpose for me is always the same and I see some familiar names. It's always about people. This is about people, people, people. It is about how to make Ossining a better, more place for people to live today, tomorrow, the next 30, the next 50 years. We're looking for input tonight to make that happen. Be it
Excuse me, Mayor, I'm sorry. I'm just getting texts that a lot of people are not able to log in. So Christina, maybe can you just email me a link that people are just having a hard time getting in. So I want to make sure that we're not excluding anybody. I apologize for interrupting.
Of course, I'll send that over to you now, Karen.
Okay.
Yeah, I was seeing Karen with a very worried look speaking on the phone with people. I had a sense something was going on. I think it's a good number of people, 39 already, for something with so many people being so busy. So I'm happy with the attendance already. We'll keep moving. This is being recorded. People could watch this at a later time, but we'll keep this moving. So for me, the desired outcome for this evening is to have folks more familiar with the process of DRI, what it is, what we wish it to be, what we hope it to be, and most importantly, that there will be a number of community engagement opportunities, this being one of them. And we absolutely want everyone, and I know some of you personally, don't be shy. This is the moment to really be asking questions. If you don't understand something, raise your hand and let us know what it is that you have as the vision going forward for this village of Ossining, very specifically. So I'm going to turn this over to my co-chair to hear a few words from her, and then we're going to dive in.
Great. Mayor, thank you so much. And Mayor, it is such an honor to be working with you, to be a visitor to the village of Ossining. I don't live in Ossining. I do live in Westchester. And this is actually the third DRI project that I've had the honor of co-chairing. And don't tell New Rochelle and Peekskill, but I think this is going to be the most fun because you are a community that really has a vision, that really has involvement and engagement, and so much happening in so many ways. My day job is I am president and CEO of the Business Council of Westchester. We are the leading economic development organization and business advocacy organization in Westchester. And then I also have the pleasure of being the co-chair of the Regional Economic Development Council. And I want to recognize Tom Scaglione, who's the executive director of that council, who's on, I know. And most of all, aside from Mayor Rika Levin and village manager Karen Detour, I really want to recognize our governor, Kathy Hochul, whose vision and commitment to the regional councils and to this process has made this a very, very robust and exciting opportunity. And just to all of you in Ossining who might not be familiar with the process, this is a very, very competitive process every year. We have many communities from throughout 7 counties in the Hudson Valley compete for this for these dollars. So the fact that this year you are a big winner says a lot, and I just can't wait to see what you as a community come up with as your priorities. So it's an honor for me to be here, for me to be part of it, and thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much to you both. Really looking forward to working together. Okay, if we move ahead. This is our agenda for our meeting tonight. We've already heard welcoming remarks. Then we'll share an overview of the Downtown Revitalization Initiative program. The overview will include a description of the DRI planning process, as well as the DRI boundary, vision, and goals. The public engagement plan will come next, followed by the call for projects, and we'll conclude talking about next steps and important dates. Then we'll open up the question and answer session. At the end of the question and answer session, around 7:55, we will summarize all the feedback that was received. And again, this meeting is being recorded, and that recording will be shared in both English and Spanish, as will the PowerPoint and the supporting materials in the virtual meeting room. Okay, so there are a few ways to ask a question or share a comment during the meeting. You can raise your hand using the Zoom controls on the lower toolbar. You can also submit a question using the Q&A box. If you submit a question or raise a hand during the presentation, know that we'll see it, but we will not address it until during the question and answer session. The chat function will be disabled during the meeting to reduce distraction. And again, the meeting and all commentaries being recorded. Okay. So we're going to share an overview of the Downtown Revitalization Program. So what is the Downtown Revitalization Initiative? We have here that the New York State Downtown Revitalization Initiative is a comprehensive approach to boosting local economies by transforming communities into vibrant neighborhoods where the next generation of New Yorkers will want to live, work, and raise a family. Every year, each of the state's 10 regional economic development councils award funding to one or two downtowns that have the potential to become a magnet for redevelopment, business, job creation, housing diversity, and opportunity. In December of last year, the Village of Ossining was selected as one of the Mid-Hudson winners and awarded $10 million. The Village of Haverstraw across the river was also selected. So what does this mean? The $10 million in DRI funding will go towards improvements within the Village of Ossining and support development of a strategic investment plan. That strategic investment plan includes a number of components, the first of which is a vision for the future of the downtown, along with goals and strategies to achieve that vision. We'll have a public engagement plan and strategy to engage folks and ensure that the goals and strategies are reflective of the community's desires. We'll prepare a downtown profile and assessment, which will characterize existing conditions. And then we will identify projects that catalyze or continue downtown revitalization. Lastly, there'll be a management and implementation strategy, which will outline how these projects would be implemented over time. Once the strategic investment plan is completed, it will be submitted to the DRI program, which is a multi-state agency program, for final funding decisions. We're joined tonight by a number of representatives from the state team, and they will continue to be involved throughout the process. Okay. So how does the DRI planning process work? First, there is a local planning committee made up of regional and local leaders who will meet regularly to guide the DRI planning process and represent the interests and priorities of the community. The LPC for the Village of Ossining is co-chaired by the mayor and Dr. Marcia Gordon, both of whom you met. And there are 17 other local and regional leaders who are part of that committee, many of whom are joining us here tonight. If we were in person, I would ask everyone to raise their hands. But for the time being, we'll just say hello. Over the next several months, the LPC will meet to guide the project team, discuss the vision, goals, and strategies, review planning documents, evaluate and recommend proposed projects. The public is invited to view these working meetings and provide comment at the end. There will also be multiple community meetings to solicit feedback from the public. Tonight is the first. This process is supported by a consultant team, staff from the Village of Ossining, and a team from New York State who will provide guidance, expertise, and technical assistance. I work for VHB. We are the lead consultant on this project. And my colleague Christy is also joining me. You'll hear from her in a little bit. All right, so this is a chart that outlines the DRI planning process. As mentioned earlier, there are 6 LPC meetings. The first was held in February. Another is scheduled for March, and we have another coming up in early April. So the meetings are taking place roughly every 3 to 4 weeks to, again, guide the process, review planning documents, and identify potential DRI projects. Public meetings, we expect there to be 3. The first is tonight in early March. We'll meet again in mid to late April, and then once more at the beginning of June. So these meetings are sort of strategically mapped out to coincide with the production of particular deliverables for the DRI planning process. As mentioned, the first deliverable is the vision, goals, and strategies. The vision will set forward a vision for the future of downtown Ossining, and goals and strategies will help achieve that vision. The public engagement plan, as we've discussed, will outline strategies to include the community in the development of these documents. The downtown profile and assessment, as we've described, will characterize existing conditions. All 3 of these documents are currently in production. Once this first group of deliverables is completed, we will move on to the project profiles. The project profiles will describe potential DRI projects, and it will include information on the project sponsors, the nature of the project, the DRI funding request, among other information. Each of these components will be compiled together for the draft strategic investment plan. That draft will be shared with the public at the 3rd community meeting. And then the final strategic investment plan will be submitted to the state for review and final funding decisions. All right, so the process that we've just outlined is applicable to all DRI programs and all DRI communities. However, we wanted to identify some revitalization themes, issues, and opportunities that are particular to the Village of Ossining. So we know that the Village of Ossining has a unique sense of place, having been developed along the Hudson River waterfront in connection to Sing Sing Prison. The village's recent revitalization efforts have recognized the legacy of public policies, such as redlining and urban renewal, that divided the community. And these revitalization efforts are bearing fruit, as evidenced by investment in the businesses in downtown Ossining, as well as the development of new housing on strategic sites. This was really nicely laid out in the winning DRI application that was prepared for the Village of Ossining. And there's also a great video that accompanied that application, which can be found in the virtual meeting room. So the DRI will build upon past planning studies as well. In particular, the 2021 comprehensive plan update Ossining Tomorrow, a goal of which is to ensure that the community can continue to thrive while supporting existing residents and businesses. For the Village of Ossining, we understand that a successful DRI planning process will reflect the community's valued cultural and socioeconomic diversity and the importance of preserving this diversity in the future. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Christy Kaselak, who will discuss establishing the DRI boundary. Christy?
Thank you, Catherine. As Catherine said, my name is Christiana Kaselak, and I too work at VHB Engineering, and I'm here going to talk about the DRI boundary. The DRI boundary is an important step in the DRI planning process as it establishes the DRI boundary. So what does that mean? So the boundary indicates where a community wants to focus its revitalization efforts. An initial DRI boundary was included in the Village of Ossining's DRI application. It includes the village's downtown Main Street corridor and its public waterfront. The area is populated by residents who represent the village's ethnic and economic diversity. The area also encompasses several village-owned properties, which present unique opportunities for public-private partnerships that would spur economic development and create benefits beyond the DRI boundary. As part of the DRI planning process, it may be determined that the initial boundary should be modified to address local issues or capitalize on opportunities. As you could see here, here is an illustration of the DRI boundary. As previously mentioned, the DRI boundary starts at the waterfront and includes the downtown Main Street corridor. Specifically, the boundary includes Sing Sing Greenway to the north, the proposed Sing Sing Museum to the south, the Hudson River and Ferry Dock to the west, and New York Route 9 Highland Avenue to the east. We want your feedback on this boundary. Specifically, are there any opportunities nearby or adjacent to the proposed DRI boundary that ought to be included that we're missing here today? An enlarged version of the DRI boundary is available in the virtual meeting room, as well as on the Village of Ossining's DRI webpage. I'm going to pass it back to Catherine to talk about the vision.
Okay, great. Thank you, Christy. So as we mentioned earlier, the DRI vision articulates each community's vision for downtown revitalization. The downtown, for purposes of the DRI, is the area within the DRI boundary. And projects that are recommended for DRI funding are located within that boundary and support the DRI vision. An initial vision statement was included in the village's DRI application and then reviewed by the local planning committee to confirm that it reflects the unique characteristics of downtown Ossining. So on our next slide, we have the vision here. I'll read it, and then we are very interested in hearing feedback, both during the Q&A session and in using the virtual meeting room through survey responses. So here is the draft vision for downtown Ossining. The Village of Ossining envisions its downtown as a vibrant, diverse, and walkable district that connects the historic Main Street corridor to the beautiful Hudson River waterfront. The revitalization of downtown Ossining will leverage its existing assets, abundant public amenities and access to transit, an innovative and entrepreneurial business community, and engaged residents who share a commitment to building a more just society, to strengthen the local economy and expand opportunities for residents and visitors alike to live, work, and play. By fostering economic development that is inclusive, sustainable, and resilient, the village will preserve its rich cultural and socioeconomic diversity while creating an even better tomorrow. Okay, Christy, turning it back over to you for the DRI goals.
As Catherine mentioned earlier in this presentation, we are to provide a vision and goals, as well as some strategies, but we'll touch upon that later on in the process. But to establish the DRI goals, they are established to help accomplish each community's vision for downtown revitalization. Goals should be detailed, attainable, and action-oriented with measurable strategies. Projects that are recommended for DRI funding should support the DRI vision and align with the DRI goals. The initial DRI goals were developed by the local planning committee with support from the consultant team. And as you can see here, here are the draft goals that we have come up to date. And as I mentioned before, these goals have been drafted based off of feedback from the LPC and are intended to help guide the LPC in choosing projects to present to the state that will fulfill the vision for downtown Austin. Goal 1, transportation and mobility. Goal 2, economic development. Goal 3, housing. Goal 4, open space, recreation, arts, and culture. Goal 1, improve walkability and connectivity within downtown Austin, which has a steep hill, by implementing improvements that will enhance safety for pedestrians and bicyclists and promote transit ridership. Goal 2, strengthen the local economy by leveraging downtown Austin's existing assets to attract visitors and foster economic development that is inclusive, sustainable, and resilient, so that the area continues to reflect the village's cultural and socioeconomic diversity. Goal 3, encourage the creation of mixed income housing in downtown Austin through public-private partnerships that result in rehabilitation of existing buildings and construction of new mixed-use, transit-oriented buildings on certain strategic sites. And Goal 4, enhance the abundant public amenities within downtown Austin, including the waterfront, green spaces, and the community center, and encourage a vibrant sense of place through outdoor dining, public art, and cultural events. Similar to the downtown Austin's boundary, the DRI boundary, and the vision, we also want your feedback on the goals. The goals are provided in the virtual meeting room for your review and feedback. Is there a goal that we're missing that you think we should be including for the list of goals for this project? Let us know.
Okay, thank you, Christy. So in this first half of the presentation, excuse me, we've reviewed the DRI planning process. We discussed the DRI boundary, as well as the draft vision statement and draft goals for downtown Austin. Now we're going to describe the public engagement plan. Then we'll speak about potential DRI projects, and then we'll open up the question and answer session. I can see that a lot of folks are writing in questions. That's awesome. We will be addressing the questions at the end of the presentation, and folks can also raise their hands at that time if they prefer to address their question to the group. So for the public engagement plan, public engagement will shape and enhance the DRI plan. The village is looking to implement projects that preserve its cultural and socioeconomic diversity while creating an even better tomorrow for the people who make up the community. And we want to hear from you throughout this process. You can get involved by attending upcoming community meetings, such as this one. There'll be another in mid-April. Provide your feedback through questions, through comments, through the surveys that are available in the virtual meeting room. And you can also submit projects for consideration. Here are some specific things that we wanted to call out in our approach to public engagement. Language access is a top priority for us. This evening's meeting has Spanish translation. Again, if you've recently joined, the interpretation globe will bring you to the Spanish language channel. We've also produced materials in both English and Spanish, including meeting flyers, as well as the virtual meeting room materials. We have worked together with the Village of Ossining to do targeted stakeholder outreach, connecting with community leaders who could then promote these engagement opportunities to their networks. The Village of Ossining has created a DRI webpage, which has information about the program, as well as upcoming meetings and agendas and recordings from past meetings. The village has sent out email blasts with the information, as well as done social media outreach, as well as sharing press release with local media outlets. We're looking forward over the coming months to continuing to spread the word, and we've developed some project-specific branding, so we hope that as folks see this logo and colors, they will associate the meeting and information with the Downtown Revitalization Initiative and this planning process. Okay, Christy, I'll pass it over to you for the call for projects, which will be the last piece of our presentation.
Thank you, Catherine. So the call for projects. Identifying DRI projects. Projects recommended for DRI funding should catalyze or continue downtown revitalization. Projects may range in cost and scale, from small improvements to large construction projects. The Village of Ossing's DRI application included an initial slate of projects that would help downtown Ossining become a magnet for redevelopment, business, job creation, house diversity, and opportunity. The DRI planning process also provides opportunities to submit additional projects that may be considered by the LPC for inclusion in the strategic investment plan, including the call for projects. You could find a link to the call for projects as in the virtual meeting room, as well as on the village's website. And you could find out more information regarding the initial slate of projects in the virtual meeting room. Project eligibility. Projects recommended for DRI funding and included in the strategic investment plan must meet the below eligibility requirements. Eligible for DRI funding include public improvements, new development or rehabilitation of existing structures, revolving loan and grant funds, branding and marketing projects. Not eligible for the funding include planning activities, operation and maintenance, pre-award costs, property acquisition, training and other program expenses, and expenses related to existing programs. The call for projects is an opportunity for stakeholders and community members to submit additional projects that may be considered by the LPC for inclusion in the strategic investment plan. It includes project sponsor information, DRI funding request, description of current conditions at the project location, description of the proposed project, including status and plan for implementation, and description of the project benefits. The call for projects has been issued today and closes Thursday, March 31st. Online submission form will be linked, as I mentioned before, on the village's webpage, as well as in the virtual meeting room that you entered in through today. And next, I'm going to hand it back over to Catherine to go through the next steps.
Okay. So as Christy described, the call for projects will be open throughout the month of March. It will close on Thursday, March 31st. We will be holding office hours in connection to the call for projects. So if you take a look at that form, it is a long form. If you take a look at that form, either on the village's website or through the virtual meeting room, there will be opportunities to speak with us and speak with representatives from the state about completing that call for projects. We welcome applications from all potential project sponsors. Looking ahead, the LPC will have its second meeting on March 19th. That is a Saturday. It will start with a presentation and discussion of project selection criteria, as well as the downtown profile and assessment. And then there'll be a walking tour of the DRI area. And lastly, our next community meeting will be held mid-April, date TBD. Please keep a lookout for information from the village, either on their website, through their emails, or through their social media to get the date and details for that second community meeting. At that community meeting, we'll be able to share the results of the call for projects, as well as the preliminary project selection criteria that the LPC has developed. And we will seek feedback on those projects.
And I'd also like to add for community meeting 2, based off of some of the feedback for tonight's meeting, we will be discussing whether the meeting will be virtual or in person, depending on comfort level, COVID protocols, and all of that. So stay tuned for, as Catherine was saying, those publications.
Okay, so it's 6:45 and we are about ready to begin the question and answer session, which also serves as an opportunity to share comments and feedback. Reiterating again that there are a few ways to ask a question or share a comment. Within Zoom, you can use the raise hand feature on the bottom of your screen along the toolbar. You could also type your question into the Q&A box if you prefer that. If you've submitted a question or raised your hand during the presentation, we will go through them now. I see that Karen has already made good progress in responding to some questions, but we'll go through those now together. Thank you.
There were a lot of technical difficulties, so we were just
Yes.
making sure everybody had access.
Yes, we understand. And we're going to ask that folks limit your comments to 2 minutes. We'll try and give folks multiple opportunities to speak if after their initial comment they would like to add another thought. But at least for our first go around, we're going to ask that you please limit your comments to about 2 minutes. Alan, who kicked us off at the start, will politely let folks know once they're getting to the 2-minute mark. And again, just to remind you, the meeting is being recorded and this recording will be shared on the village's YouTube page.
Just before, are there any other opening remarks? Because what I'd like to do is give our translators a moment to break and switch each other out. But I'll wait to see if there's any other opening remarks we want to cover before we get to Q&A.
Yeah, I'll just add that during the Q&A session, we will stop sharing this presentation. And my colleague Yuri Cheng from CARP Strategies will share it's called a Miro board, a sort of online whiteboard tool so that folks can see our note-taking happening in real time. But let's take a pause, Alan, so that our translators can switch channels. And then once you're ready, we can go ahead and I'll ask Yuri to introduce yourself and share your screen. So Alan, let us know once you're ready to go.
Give me one moment, please.
Sure.
Just one moment. All right, I think we're going to need to continue with our current translation setup at the moment. And
Okay.
if we find another natural break or pause, where we can switch those out, we'll do so, but I don't want to delay the meeting anymore. So let's please proceed.
Okay. All right. So now this will be an opportunity for folks to ask questions. We're going to try and go back and forth between the questions that folks have written in using the Q&A box and folks who have raised their hands. Alan, I can get started with working through the Q&A, and then I can ask you to recognize folks who have raised hands. I'll also add that folks are welcome if you would prefer to provide written feedback in the virtual meeting room. The virtual meeting room was developed so that folks can read through this information at their own pace and then provide feedback throughout this meeting, but also throughout the rest of the week. We're going to leave that virtual meeting room open until the end of day Friday. Okay, so Dri, would you like to introduce yourself and the Miro board, and then I can chime back in and begin reading out some questions?
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Yuri Chang. I'm a consultant with Carp Strategies, an urban planning firm who is helping do community outreach for the DRI planning process. And so we're excited to use this tool called Miro. Basically, imagine that you're in a physical room and there's a whiteboard where people are writing their ideas on Post-its and sticking them onto the board. And so that's what we'll be doing. We've already started to capture some of the questions that were submitted in the Q&A function in Zoom, and we'll continue to capture those here as the Q&A session continues.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. All right, so I will start going through the questions in the Q&A section. I see that a number of them have been answered already, but I'm going to go ahead and read them out loud and see if we have anything to add. So I'll read 2 or 3 written questions, and then we'll go back over and acknowledge folks who have raised their hands. So I'm seeing that at 6:15, Gareth had commented that there was a typo in the Gazette URL. We're very sorry about that. I think that that caused some difficulty for folks entering the meeting. So we will be sure in future to address that. We had another comment here asking, why is the meeting virtual? Will all of the meetings be virtual? And I see that Karen replied that this meeting is virtual, and going forward, we will need to evaluate the format. I think that will be based on a number of things, including level of comfort, given COVID protocols, but please, keep your eyes out, and we will let folks know what format people can expect for public meeting 2. Was there anything else that someone wanted to answer on either of those, add on either of those? No. All right. Okay, Alan, so let's move over to someone who has raised hand. Could I ask you to acknowledge them?
Sure. The first hand raised I see is Sheila Speller. So Sheila, I'm going to send a command to you to open your mic. And when you do, please introduce yourself, and you get about 2 minutes to share your comment or ask your question to the group. All right, I'll try that once more. You should be able to unmute your mic.
I think it's Sheila Speller. Are you able to unmute your mic and ask your question?
All right, I sent the command a few. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I did not raise my hand, or else I hit something that shows that my hand is raised. I have no comment right now.
Okay.
Oh,
well, thank
I'm
you.
sorry about that.
Well, yeah, if you change your mind, then we would love to hear from you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, great. All right, so let's go back over to the answered questions. We see that there is a question here that attendance may be smaller than it could potentially be because it was almost impossible to find the link to get into the meeting. This is such an important initiative, and we're spending time making sure there is an easy and intuitive path to be part of the process. And in response, I see that Karen had shared a direct Zoom link. Yes, we hear you. We understand that this has been an issue for folks in joining tonight. We had shared a link to the virtual meeting room, and through that room, you could join the Zoom webinar. I think we will try and arrange the virtual meeting room should we use it in future so that it's very clear how you join the Zoom webinar and become part of the live meeting. Okay, and we had a similar question saying, I had trouble finding the key link to get into the meeting, not so intuitive. All right, we hear you. Okay, let's switch over to folks who have raised hand. Alan, I'll ask you to chime in.
You bet. The next hand raise I see is from Dana Levenberg. And Dana, I'm going to send a command to you to open up your line. And when you do, just take yourself off mute, say hi, and you get about 2 minutes to let us know what's on your mind.
Okay, well, hello, this is Dana, and you guys look like you can hear me because you're all smiling. So, and it's Dana Levenberg, not Dana White, who was appropriately let in. Dana White, you're looking glam tonight on an International Women's Day, and I love to see all these women in power in this meeting. I think this is so exciting. The DRI is incredibly exciting for all the development that can happen in Ossining, and also how it can tie into our shared waterfront. We do have a town park, and I saw a question from Jason Salo about town-owned property. We own the Lewis Engle Park, but it is still in the village boundaries. So it's a town park in the village. And you know that we've been working very hard through the Cornell Climate Adaptive Design Studio, as well as our second round now that we're working on with HDR to think about how to make the waterfront more resilient, but also how it can help, bring economic development, tourism, et cetera, to Ossining in general, to the downtown, and then up into the village and to the town. The Sing Sing Prison Museum project is really incredible. I'm very curious. I know that it was part of the original application and presentation, and I'm curious to know if the projects that were already part of that have sort of been earmarked in some way, or if they are starting from scratch to need to apply. And that's the same with the pier extension project that I know Gareth Hoffman has been working on. Both of those are very exciting for what they may be able to bring to Ossining. And I am looking forward to hearing more about both of those projects, as well as continuing to collaborate in any way we can to make sure that all of the benefits that can accrue to the village can also be a part of our shared waterfront. So thanks so much for the opportunity. Congratulations again to the village, and tally ho, onward.
I just want to comment that I'm not sure Dana mentioned she's the supervisor. I think most of the people in Ossining know that, but since it's being recorded and maybe some of the consultants might not be aware of that. So thank you, Dana Levenberg.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you for that introduction, Mayor Levin. I appreciate it. To answer your question, Dana, about the projects that were a part of the DRI application, yes, there was an initial slate of projects that were included in the Village of Ossining's winning DRI application. Those projects will be included. They will enter information in the call for projects that is being released and will be open this month. So they, yes, we're part of the initial slate. They will be under consideration, and there is the opportunity to add to that list through the call for projects and other avenues over the course of the planning process.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. And thank you, Yuri, for going ahead and capturing questions and comments on the Miro board. It's cool to see that it's already growing, pretty well populated. Okay, so I'm going to head back over to the written questions, and I see that we now have quite a lot, so I will try and move more quickly. So for the next question, someone had asked what is VHB? Karen answered that they are the planning consultants hired by New York State to implement the DRI planning process. That is correct. And I think in my effort to make up time and jump right into the presentation, I had skipped over my introduction. And so I work as the project manager at VHB for the Ossining DRI. VHB is a planning and engineering firm with offices up and down the East Coast. We have 3 offices in New York State, and we have a team that is working to support the village, the LPC, and state partners in creating the strategic investment plan, which will guide investment of $10 million in DRI funding. We have worked on past DRI projects in communities throughout New York State, and we're really excited to be working with you all this year. The next question that was asked and answered is anyone from the business community on the committee? I think this refers to the LPC. Karen responded yes. Yes, that's right. There are members, business owners on the LPC. We can work together with the village to make a list of the LPC members available to folks who have attended this meeting. So you can take a look at who they are and potentially attend an upcoming meeting. Okay, so let's move over to someone who has raised a hand. Alan, I'll ask you to take over.
Right. So the next hand up, let me just make sure I lower Dana's hand so we don't get confused. All right, Jermaine Smith. So Jermaine, if you'd like to take yourself off of mute, say hello, and you get about 2 minutes to share your comments on the presentation and the DRI in general.
Thank you. Thank you for the information everyone is sharing. I have a suggestion. Could we possibly put the information that's in the virtual room via links on the website so people can access it relatively easy, though for those who may not be as tech savvy to be able to scroll around the room? I think a lot of people are looking for information on that website. And if they go on, that the information that you have is very useful. And I think if we can make it available on the website, that'll be beneficial to the community as a whole. Second thought is, I know a lot of times with these projects, we usually have like familiar faces as part of the process. I'm hoping that as we move forward and as well as on the committee, that we have some new faces, interjection of new blood, and some diversity of thought in the process moving forward. So I'm hoping that that's part of the process. I'm not sure who's on the committee, so it may be already done already, but I just wanted to share that from the perspective of the community. So really the biggest thing was that is making that information available on the website. I think that's one of the issues with the link today. People were trying to get in and looking for the information on the website and on the agenda. And it wasn't there. You updated to social media, but a lot of people are not on social media. So I think if we can have that information updated, it'd be beneficial. And that was it. Thank you, guys.
Great. Thank you so much. Yes, to your first comment, we will work with the village to try and bring as much of that information as possible onto the village website, so it's easily accessible. I'm a fan of having information in multiple venues so that we can reach as many folks as possible. So getting to your second point, we do hope that we are able to engage some new faces and new voices in this planning process. Okay, so looking over at some of the questions, which we're going to move through more quickly because we've got 28 open and an hour remaining. I'm going to read a comment that someone shared saying, generation is typically understood as 25 years. So things that get started now need to last 25 years to meet the next generation, as stated in the first slide. Excited to see you plan for sustainable projects lasting that long here in Ossining. Great comment. Moving down to the next one. We have a comment about we have people from the community that are not on this call because the link on the DRI website and the agenda are not working. I'm so sorry about that. And it should be corrected. We have another question about what's the date for the walking tour, just one date or several? So the walking tour will be part of LPC meeting 2. Those meetings are open to the public, but are geared toward being working sessions for the LPC. And so we can share information on that meeting date, time, location, and agenda. Right now, it's just the one. Okay, moving through these questions. There's a question, how much of the DRI grant will be utilized by consultants? And there was a response from the New York State Department of State. Of the $10 million that was awarded to the Village of Ossining, $300,000 is to be utilized for consultant services during this planning phase of the Ossining DRI. And that leaves $9.7 million in DRI funding for projects.
And to add to that, Catherine, the consultant team does not only include VHB and CARP strategies. We also have Kevin Dorka, Sharp Lens, and Trophy Point consultants as well. And the team will collectively work together on different points throughout the process.
Yes, and different team members will be taking part in different LPC meetings and community meetings along the way.
And I'm sorry, I forgot WXY. They're a large player in this as well, and they're a part of our consulting team as well.
Yes. Okay, someone asked, what is the potential budget for these projects individually and collectively? So as described, there's a total of $10 million that's been awarded to the Village of Ossining through the DRI program. And following the planning phase, $9.7 million is available for projects.
Catherine,
Okay,
I think maybe it might be good to point out that the $9.7 million, this process and the public engagement process that's going to come over the next few weeks will help take projects that have been proposed in the proposal and then open call for projects, which is a little broader, people bringing projects to the table through application. Once those are determined, they'll each have a project budget associated with them. And then it will be up to the state to determine the allocation of funding for those projects. It would be unlikely that any project's entire budget would be funded through this process. This process is really to provide seed money, essentially, to accelerate projects that might have had a much harder time getting started otherwise.
Yes, thank you for that
is
context.
Great. And also to add to that, it is important to note that the DRI funding is a reimbursable program, meaning that the project sponsor is to have the money up front to complete the project. And upon the completion of the project, that is when the funding, if the project was selected by the state, will then be reimbursed through the allocated DRI funding.
Great. Thank you both. I'm receiving a message that we should speak more slowly for the purpose of translation. So I apologize because on one hand, we're eager to move through the questions, but on the other hand, we want to ensure that there's enough time for translation. So we'll try and strike a good balance. Okay, so let's go ahead and acknowledge someone who has a raised hand.
Sure thing. The next raised hand I see, excuse me, is Rob Lowenthal. So Rob, you should now have a command to open your mic. When you do, please say hello. Speak slowly and great. Take 2 minutes and let us know what's on your mind about the DRI.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, Rob Lowenthal. I'm associated with the new bookstore here in town, Hudson Valley Books for Humanity. And, I've been listening closely and I've put in some questions about the committee. Karen had said that the list of the committee members were on the village website. I couldn't find it. And I know at least one other person who
I apologize, Rob. I overspoke. I thought they were there, but they will be.
You're on mute, Karen.
Check. They will be there. So check first thing.
You could
I
also
thought they were up already.
you could also go back about 2 weeks into the mayor's note, and there was a list of the people there, but we'll put them up tomorrow.
I'm just sort of wondering, because nobody in the business community, people that own businesses along Main and Spring, nobody I know is on the committee. So what was the process of getting members on this committee? And I don't really see sort of, all good points that you're making tonight, all great points, but I don't really see where, the business viewpoint, the independent business owner or business viewpoint, or somebody who's either running a business or who is thinking of starting a business is addressed here. And I want to make sure that at least gets addressed and there is representation of the small business owner in Ossining. I mean, granted, these are waterfront, these are all great ideas, but I don't want the business community to get lost in the shuffle, as it were. And maybe that's the wrong term, but yeah, so that is my concern. All done.
We do have.
Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
We do have two. I think it's 2 or 3 business owners. Melita Silva is on the LPC, as is Elizabeth Martinez, who owns Carmen Market and Carmen Lounge. The process was vetted by the state, who ultimately had the selection of the members of the LPC. So there was a broad list of criteria that the state looked to address. So certainly very important is the business community, and we plan on making sure as we do outreach to make sure that all local business owners have an opportunity to weigh into this process.
I mean, how were they approached? Because one of the people you mentioned is with Bethany, right? Am I
No.
No. Okay. There's the Karma Lounge, and what was the other?
The business owners were that are on the LPC right now are Melita Silva and Elizabeth Martinez, who is owner of Karma Lounge and Karma Market, and Melita Silva owns Melita's Home Goods.
Yeah, I know Melita. Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Sorry, I had to go and find my unmute button. Okay, thank you so much for that comment. Looking to some of the open questions that we have now, we have a question clarifying the DRI boundary exists into town property ? And I see that Karen would like to answer this question. Karen, would you like to respond to that one?
The issue of the boundary, I'm sorry.
Does it go into town line, Karen?
The town line?
Right.
Yeah, so I think the supervisor really captured that. The village, the park, Lewis Angle Park is within the town, within the village of Ossining. And the project also extends to incorporate the Sing Sing Prison Museum, which is on state property.
Right.
Great. Okay, thank you. Looking at another open question, it says, what is the different focus of the current visioning process, including public engagement, above and beyond the visioning and public engagement that already went into the comprehensive plan and the DRI proposal? Are we reopening the vision, or are we now taking it as a given and moving on to operationalizing it correctly? I'm glad to take a stab at answering this question. So the vision statement specifically that was included in the DRI application was revised in response to feedback from the LPC. And we expect to make more revisions in response to feedback from today's meeting and feedback that we'll receive through the virtual meeting room over the course of this week. So that that vision statement, which was drafted as part of the application process, forms the basis for the vision. And there have been some updates and changes in response to community comment. Then to the point about the focus of this process versus the comprehensive plan and the DRI proposal. Ultimately, what we're driving toward is a strategic investment plan, which identifies shovel-ready projects that will receive DRI funding from the state. And so this process is focused ultimately on identifying projects that together will catalyze and continue investment in downtown Ossining. Glad for others to chime in, or I could keep moving.
Well, I think if I may hear the question differently, but to maybe put it simply, the folks involved here are very much aware that for the past 5 to 7 years, there have been a number of community engagement, including small businesses, including different community organizations for different things. There was the Dwarka study. So Kevin Dwarka is actually part of the consulting team, and a number of overlaps, because the purpose is not to reopen and redo vision statements and look at it that way, but rather I think the key underlying words, if I hear anything out of this, is shovel-ready projects that already were part of, whether it was the comprehensive plan, the housing projects, the downtown redevelopment council that put together another study a few years ago, and a number of other studies that people always say, well, we do these studies, what do you do with them? Well, actually, the answer is here we are. This is what we do. We have them ready. We then have projects that either have sponsors or close to sponsorship, not all of them do, that are doable, that probably we couldn't do as a village on our own without this kind of effort behind it. But this is not a reopening and a restart. And the truth is that different levels of both government, administration of political entities, all sorts of folks for the past 5 or 7 years really are to be thanked for getting us to this point. And so this is the move forward on what has been brought up by various parts and people of our community. And the goal is to figure out which ones are the ones we can realistically do and then sustain over the next few years. So it's not just start a project, but then, and I see some questions here, well, you know, what about going forward? How do you sustain? So these are the elements that this initiative is looking at, and I think rightfully so. And it is focused on the downtown predominantly. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your point of view, yes, there are a couple of areas where the town and village sort of crisscross a bit, and we can't just chop up the land. And that is a good thing here, because I think both municipalities then benefit from it. And that's a very good thing, at least from my perspective. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on to some of our other questions we've received. So the next question is, what are we going to do about parking? Rather open-ended question, but I think I'm hearing that there are concerns about addressing parking in the downtown. And that's something that we can flag going forward. Again, if folks have any specific thoughts or comments, please feel free to include those and we can address them more specifically.
I'm going to just comment that there is a parallel path parking study, actually 2 initiatives going on, also listed in many of our ongoing projects. That's going to be used to inform anything we do with this initiative, so that they're not playing bumper cars, but rather that they travel in unison.
Yes, yep, or the parking mobility study for sure. Okay, I'll take one last written question, then we'll go back over to folks raising hands. Has any thought been given to extending the boundaries to include Spring Street? So this goes back to the DRI boundary. part of the purpose of this meeting is to receive feedback on this boundary, particularly if there are opportunities nearby or adjacent to the current boundary that we may want to include. And so we can add this feedback about Spring Street into what we consider following this meeting. And if anyone would like to, jump in, please feel free, but otherwise we can take that feedback and keep moving with the next question.
I think it's important for people to understand that for an area to be considered, there needs to be a project sponsor. So in the absence of municipally owned property or a private sector entity that wants to develop a project that would meet the criteria for the DRI funding, that it would be hard for us to incorporate certain areas where we don't have ownership or site control. So it really is dependent on people coming forward if they're in the surrounding areas, immediate surrounding areas, with ideas that they would like to take forward in this process.
Yes.
And
yes,
then we do have the application for that, the open call for projects, which we will be pushing out so everybody has that information. So if they do have a project.
Great. Okay. So before we recognize someone who's raised a hand, I do want to let folks know that if you would like to ask a question in Spanish, please feel free to do so using either the question and answer box or by raising your hand. We have translators who will be able to translate your question and the response. So please feel free to do that. All right, Alan, recognizing a raised hand.
Great, thank you. And with that, just another reminder, if you are speaking, please to try to speak at maybe 80 or 90% of your regular pace, just so our translators can do their level best to capture everything. So with that, the next hand I see raised is Gareth Hoffman. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly, Gareth. I've just sent a command to you to unmute your line, and when you do, you've got 2 minutes to share your comment or question with us.
Good evening. My name is Gareth Hoffman. You were close on the pronunciation. Thank you. I'm a resident of the town of Ossining and also a president of a small nonprofit here in Ossining called Hudson Valley Stream Conservancy. And I envision a dynamic waterfront filled with excited people enjoying many different attractions there on, hot summer weekend days. Those activities could include things like a deep water pier extension that would allow many types of ships to come visit Ossining, many of the historic ships and so forth. I'll talk more about that in a second. But also for the total concept, a swimming beach in what is now the Lewis Engel Park, which is town, festivals, summer concerts, art, all of that. But the one thing that involves the village and the DRI is the potential for this deep water pier. So my organization has been working on this since 2008, actually, when Catherine Borgia, Joe Clark, and myself started this, and we had the ferry terminal moved over a little bit to an angle to allow a future development of a deep water pier. So we got a grant from the DEC to pursue the design and permitting of that in 2015, and we're still working on it, and we are almost at a shovel-ready, fully permitted status. We have Army Corps, DEC, and SHPO, a couple others as well. Let me describe what that could bring to the waterfront. So imagine the tall ships. Those are the historic ships that are sailing ships that have various educational programs and musical programs that they ply the Hudson River and other waters around the East Coast. So some of these are like, well, of course, the Hudson River Clearwater is one that is close to our hearts here, and they have never been able to enjoy coming to the Ossining waterfront itself. They have come to Shattamuck a couple times, but the water there was so low that they got stuck in the mud and they don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah. Gareth, I just want to let you know you've just passed the 2-minute mark. So if you could wrap up your thought, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Well, I'll wrap it up. Tall ships, World War II ships, cruise ships for jazz evenings, fireboats, Navy boats. It could bring a lot of dynamic fun, and we want to see people coming down to the village waterfront for that fun. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. That's an exciting vision to share. Okay, moving over to some of the questions that folks have written in, questions and comments. I'll read a couple comments. One says, Ossining innovates, would love to help in any way we can, including by continuation and expansion of our programming in any of the newly created spaces. That's great. Another says, personally, I think it's important that the vision, goals, and associated strategies not be reopened so that we can avoid moving backward. We should take them as is. The public had plenty of opportunity to participate on those higher order contours previously and move on to translating them into a set of SMART projects. SMART being specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time-bound. Great, thank you for that input. We have another question saying, will there be an opportunity to present a project concept to the LPC and/or public? For now, the opportunity to share project concepts is through the call for projects. And so I would encourage folks who may be potential project sponsors to take a look at the call for projects application, attend the open office hours, excuse me, if you have questions. And then once those projects have been received at the end of the month, the LPC will review what had been submitted.
And Catherine, it looks like there was a comment above that regarding the call for projects, asking what are the acceptable formats, the form alone or the form with a PowerPoint or PDF file attachments, a video. And to answer that question, the form itself is a Microsoft form. So if you could please fill that out accordingly. And within the form, we do request some specific information to be sent to our email address that we'll share after this presentation. And it's also included in that form. You could attach as many files and any type of file that you may have. The more information you have for a project, the easier it'll be for the LPC to kind of understand where that project is in terms of how formed it is it shovel ready, as the mayor mentioned earlier. So again, you could provide any type of information that you have, and the more information you have, the better it would be.
Great. Okay. Another written comment. What projects are currently being considered? Will the climate change recommendations collected previously be included? So the projects that are currently being considered are those which were included in the Village of Ossing's DRI application. Those can be found in the virtual meeting room. There are boards with information and photographs about each. You can also take a look at the DRI application itself, which is on the village's webpage. Looking at another comment, someone said, do I understand that the only projects to be submitted must be within the DRI boundary? So responding to that, yes, projects must be within the DRI boundary. There is the opportunity to adjust the DRI boundary at this stage in the process. So if there are opportunities nearby or immediately adjacent to the DRI boundary, those would be considered. And to underline what Karen had said earlier, we're looking for projects that have sponsors identified, whether that be the village or a private property owner. Okay, let's move over to someone who's raised a hand. Alan, could I ask you to, yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Next, I see Henry Welt. Henry, you should now have a command to open up your line or unmute your mic. And when you do, please say hello. And you got 2 minutes to let us know what you think of the DRI.
I think the DRI is great. Hello, everybody. So first of all, I want to give a shout out to Gareth, who's a not so recent graduate of the Ossining Innovates program, reflected in his current business, actually. So we are real proud of what he's doing. My question, though, kind of is a process question. So my understanding is that the purpose of the DRI is to help communities build out an infrastructure which would then be able to leverage that $10 million and support economic development. I think that's an accurate perception. So based on that, my question would be, what criteria do we use to understand what kind of infrastructure improvements or expansions are actually going to be conducive to economic activity? How do we know what's going to help? Do we have a process, or are people just picking their favorite projects?
Hi, this is Catherine. Thanks for that question, Henry.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what we're getting at are a set of project selection criteria. And so we're approaching it in 2 ways. First, we'll have the vision statement for downtown Ossining, which will also be connected to a set of goals. And then from those goals would be strategies. So, you know, I can sort of spitball one. If the goal is to have a more lively downtown, perhaps, I'm sorry, if the vision is to have a more lively downtown, perhaps the goal is to make it more walkable. And then a strategy could be improving infrastructure for pedestrians, like sidewalks, for example. So we are hoping that in that way, the vision, goals, and strategies will lead to a set of specific projects. You know, particular infrastructure.
Can I just ask on that example?
Mm-hmm.
So that sounds like a terrific goal and a sensible goal, but it wouldn't make any sense unless you had a basis to understand from the community or from the people who want to walk downtown that that's what they want. Right? At the end of the day, if you want to make a walkable community, you've got to understand that people want to walk there and what they need in order to walk there.
Yep.
And
that's
so
right.
what I'm asking is, what's the process through which we take that through which we gather that information?
Yeah.
And
so
it's
that's this meeting, right? So we have a vision statement.
Well, but this meeting does not necessarily include, as far as I understand it, the ultimate people who would make the significant private sector investments in Ossining and would be attracted to Ossining because of this great infrastructure that we're building out. And to me, that's a disconnect, right? There has to be some knowledge or some speculation, at least, about what these future business people would want before we build an infrastructure. If it doesn't appeal to them, we've just built an infrastructure.
Yes. Yeah. So I will move on to the next question, but I think to your point, the LPC includes both business owners as well as folks who are developers. And so there is private sector involvement, both in today's meeting, from what I understand, and on the LPC. But you're right, we want to make those connections. We want to be connecting the public infrastructure investments to the opportunity for economic growth. Okay, thank you, Henry. That was good. All right, so I'm going to move over to some more open questions. Will there be other ways to gather community input? Would be great to offer phone paper options for people not comfortable with technology, especially since this virtual meeting room is tough to navigate and probably requires more advanced devices or faster connectivity. This will exclude people who may be more directly impacted. So yes, there will be other ways to gather community input. We expect to be doing outreach in person using paper flyers and taking down notes over the course of this process. And we also are relying on traditional means of reaching people. For example, a press release was sent out about this evening's meeting. So sort of not just social media and email, but also more traditional ways of reaching folks. Okay, moving on to the next comment. Okay, there's a comment about, can you do a hybrid meeting? That's a good question, and one that we'll need to work through as we think about upcoming meeting formats. There's a question, is this something that could be used to improve parking in the Main Street area? For example, mobile parking app like in other towns? That's a good question. I'm actually not sure to the extent that
We
DRI
actually
funding
are
would be
rolling
used.
that
Thanks,
out
Karen.
anyway.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
the mobile parking app is we're working out some of the details with the vendor, but you will see within the next few months a mobile parking app being rolled out. So some of those things were recommendations from the parking study that we did last year, and we will be implementing those, and those will be happening over the next couple of weeks and months. So thank you for that, but we are trying to move into the 21st century on parking.
All right, idea addressed.
I do want to add in that vein that projects that are already being done by the village don't actually qualify. So we are looking at parking, we are looking at some infrastructure changes. They don't actually qualify because they're already being worked on, they're already budgeted, and we're already on the way to doing them. This is not a discussion about a new project and a new study. A DRI given by the state is, as I understand it, you get to win this because part of what you did is already involve the public in many conversations, which we have over the last 5 years in many studies. As I said earlier, I'm not sure everybody was on, from housing to parking, to road congestion, to commutation, to Sing Sing Museum, to tourism, to small business involvement over the last, certainly as long as I've been a trustee, but it started before me. 200 Main Street was studied before, and this is a culmination because we did those studies, because there was a lot of public input on so many of you were involved, frankly, in many of, much of the input, the housing project, the really all the studies, comprehensive plan is the one I was thinking of with all those committees. Because of all of those is how you, when one competes, when a municipality, that gives you the edge on having an opportunity to win in such a competitive environment, which was mentioned in the beginning of this. This is not a new project. This is a grant given because so much homework has been done, so much engagement. This is a culmination of that and a prioritization and a picking of what handful, 2 handfuls, 3 handfuls, you know, whatever the number is, we can possibly move forward with the help of the state, and which need to be operationalized in some way. The seed money and then needs to be something that can actually be done. So I think that's just a perspective, and we need engagement in prioritizing, and did we miss something? Is there something adjacent that should be added? Those kind of conversations.
Yep, that's great, thank you. All right, let's take a question from someone with a raised hand, and then we'll take a brief pause so that our translators can switch shifts.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Catherine. I'm sure they'll appreciate that. Next up is Eric Garrity. So Eric, I'm going to send a command to you to open your line, and then you'll get 2 minutes to share your thoughts with the group here, please.
All right, Alan, can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate what Gareth Hoffman had said. The Deepwater dock also has a great impact on Sing Sing Kill Brewery here in the downtown. We currently get our grain for brewing beer from the schooner Apollonia that sails the grain from local farmers, he malts up in Hudson, New York, and we get a zero emissions delivery system to produce our product here in the village. It's become difficult because we have the New York Waterways dock, which will not allow him access. And we're occasionally using the Chatham dock, which the last time he docked, he incurred some damage because of the way that they landed the anchoring system. So there's a limitation to the tides that he is available to make these deliveries. So the Deepwater dock coming off of Lewis Angle Park would be huge to get the Hudson back as a transportation system, get trucks off the roadways, be able to deliver products, not just grain and so forth, but also the finished products that as raw materials come down the river, we're working with the schooner Apollonia to create a kind of a sail freight network, which would also increase commerce on the Hudson and bring the raw materials downriver and finished products back up the river to make the Hudson a real, trade-oriented, business hub again, as it once was. So I know that Gareth had worked very hard with the village and the town in the past, and my understanding is this project is shovel ready. So for all the points that Gareth brought up, and also a sustainable economic future for Ossining, I think that project is key. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, that's great to hear.
All right. Can I just take 1 minute to?
Yes. Thank you for reminding
I will
me.
work as quickly as I can, so bear with me, please.
Okay. Taking a brief pause.
Okay, just a few more seconds.
Unos segundos más.
One second, I think I put the wrong translator into the wrong room.
Parece que puse a la intérprete equivocada.
Okay, Cecilia, as a translator, if you could please choose the Spanish channel. Wonderful. All right. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the patience there, and we can proceed.
Okay, thank you, Alan. All right, I'm looking at some of the questions that have come in. Someone said, I was only able to get in about halfway, the halfway point of your presentation. I think you should repeat the meeting with clear instruction about how to use the virtual meeting room. This meeting is being recorded, and so we will share that meeting recording with folks so that they can see the presentation should they have missed some of it. We have another question. Can you please explain the difference between the DRI and DRF as far as projects and handling of those? That's not a question that I can answer offhand, but I'm glad to take that question back to the group and provide a response. Okay, we have another question. Where does the DRI project list live? Good question. The virtual meeting room has slideshows with all of the projects that were included in the DRI application. That's the initial slate of projects. You can also find the DRI application on the village's website.
If you look at the DRI application, there's a link on the website for DRI. May not be obvious, but it's actually in the DRI project. And it starts on page 4 after where it shows the map, and then it lists each of the project with a paragraph or 2 of detail. Make sure you go to the village of Ossining, though, not the town of.
Yes. Yep. And we can link to the application in the chat. Okay, let's move over to someone who has a hand raised.
Great. Thank you for that. The next one is AR Swan. So AR Swan, you should be able to open your line and then share your comments with us, please.
Hey, how are you tonight?
Great, thank you.
Good. AR Swan, I'm a resident of Ossining for 16 years, and I'm the current Commodore at the Ossining Boat and Canoe Club. Excited about some of the developments that we've talked tonight, but not all, in regards especially to the pier and the pier extension. Although Gareth's vision is lovely, and I understand Eric's concerns, and trust me, we all want more boats on the Hudson. I'm worried about the cost to a 100-year-old institution that provides some of the most affordable access to boating on the Hudson. I think the extension itself going out is fine because you can get out there into deep water, but as we know all too well, where some of the fingers are aligned coming in, some of the easternmost at low tide, that's in about a foot of water. And it proposes a risk to some of our members, especially kayakers and boaters returning to use that northernmost dock. So as a taxpayer, I'm also concerned after the initial grants are gone, are we going to be on the hook for the placing, pulling, storage, and maintenance of these docks that are going to take a beating out there every year? So I was just wondering if the other locations have been considered in the DRI zone, like extending the fishing piers from the docks, from the park, where there's a little bit deeper water, and if a breakwater has been considered to protect the investment that's being put there. Thanks.
Thank you for that.
Yes, yeah, thank you. It's not a question that I have an answer to offhand, but it's one that we can share with the project team and with the LPC as they're considering the pier extension project and others. All right, I would like to do a time check with folks. It is 7:45. This meeting is scheduled until 8. And so looking at the remaining open questions in the Q&A box, as well as the remaining raised hands, unfortunately, we will not be able to address each one live before our 8 p.m. end time. So if you have a hand raised and you would like to ask a question or leave a comment, please put it in the Q&A box and we will keep a record of it. And we will respond to the questions that have come in the meeting summary that's shared.
Catherine, given
Yes.
everybody's challenges getting on, I would really hate to end the meeting with so many questions left. I mean, it took people a good 15 minutes, so I think that we have to extend our time by at least 15 minutes. So can we please do that? And can we please maybe try to focus on the questions, maybe skip over the ones that are stating things like I couldn't find the link and just focus on the ones that are more salient, because I really think it's important that we don't give this short shrift.
Yes.
I'd like to, thank you, Karen. I'd like to add one more thing. So some of these may not be exactly redundant, but they're similar. So let's do that. Also, some of these end up being the same person with different points of view, which are totally valid. But I think we should maybe even go back a little bit, because it seems like we skipped a couple of people, is to go back and at least give an answer to individuals. Even if an individual may have said 3 or 4 different things, at least let's try to hit as many individuals that had something to say so that they're not feeling like they're not being heard. So I think if you skipped, it looked to me like a couple of people, I'm sure not intentionally because there's so many on here.
Just
But
to
there's one
confirm, I was able to get our translators to stay on for 15 more minutes. They originally had an understanding of an 8 p.m. end, but we can get 15 more minutes.
Great.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you to Liz and Cecilia. We appreciate it.
Let's go back.
Kiona Stovall has her hand up, and she had a question in the chat. So my feeling is she may want to ask the question that she has in the chat. So
okay,
sometimes there's a little overlap. So
yep, that's right. Okay, I'm glad to recognize Kiona. And then Mayor Levin, if there are questions that we've skipped that you'd like us to address, please let me know. I'm sorry that
I'm
wasn't
doing
in
it right
verbatim.
now because
Okay.
it's hard to pick and choose. So I'm just going back a little bit in case we just accidentally may have. So I'm doing that while you're taking the question.
Okay, great. All right, Alan, if you could recognize Kiona, that'd be great.
Looking, there we go. And Kiona, you should have a command to open your line.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is well. I basically just wanted to know, since I've lived in a village, I'm 39, most of my entire life in Ossining, probably my whole life. And I've seen the transition many times, which is a beautiful village to live in. But I'm kind of concerned because I do have a teenage son who lives here amongst a few friends. And we're just wondering like what or if they will be implementing any of this money towards enhancing, promoting, or helping to create more Black-owned businesses in the village. I mean, physically, like brick and mortar, I can only name about 4 off the top of my head in all of these businesses here in the village. I'm sure some people do have registered businesses that just are not physical, but I constantly talk to teenagers and they're saying that there's really nothing to do. I know the recreation center had some updates years ago, but even since I was a kid, there hasn't been many changes. So I was just wondering if there is going to be any plans or talks about that. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that question. I can say that there is not currently a project that focused specifically on building Black-owned businesses. I do know that there is a project proposed for improvements to the community center. That is a project that was included in the DRI application and is shown in the virtual meeting room. But I think that we will bring your comment back to the LPC and the project team and think about how the projects with DRI funding could support the creation of Black-owned businesses in the village. Okay. Mayor Levin, were there questions?
Yeah, I think
you'd like us
Jennifer
to address?
Cabrera at 6:48. I think we got a few came in at exactly the same moment, and that may have been an issue. Ms. Cabrera has at 6:48. I think we may have answered indirectly with community input that this isn't. There will be 2 more of these. Also in building the proposal, it was based on probably 5 years worth of projects, all of which included community input. Again, whether it was about housing or about downtown parking or about the waterfront or about a youth bureau or the community center, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's more about, are there other ways to gather community input? But I think that's the question.
Yes.
And I think that probably should be posted somewhere because that is something we're always challenged with.
Yeah, and this is definitely a focus of the public engagement plan. We want to be able to reach folks through community meetings where we can share information and receive feedback in a public forum. But we also recognize that it's difficult to attend community meetings and we want to meet people where they are. And so I think we'll need a mix of strategies to gather a representative set of community input.
that was the one I caught. There, some of them have similar. I'm just quickly looking.
Yeah, I think the one that I was up to was would someone amplify on existing proposals to connect and integrate the waterfront to downtown? I know we've talked about the waterfront fairly extensively, and connecting to the downtown center is a part of the vision and goals for the project. And I'll try and find some questions that are posed by folks who we haven't heard from. I see a question. Is somebody going to propose a project to completely rehab the bank building on the corner of Main and 9 so that it can be put to good use by the village?
Main and 9 is 200. Is that the one you think people are referring to, Karen?
Yeah, she is 200.
It is the one right behind me. And yes,
okay, so
that
the
is
200 Main
project.
Street is a project, both in DRI. It is one of the proposed projects.
Yes. So yeah, the 200 Main Street building, bank building, was included in the DRI application and is shown in the virtual meeting room. So please check that out. Okay, let's move over and do another person who's raised their hand. How about Tamara Bridgewater?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, Tamara, you should have a command. There you go.
Hi, hello everyone. Good evening. It's Tamara Bridgewater. I just have a couple of quick
Sorry
questions.
about that, Tamara.
No, that's okay. Everybody says it wrong. It's fine. So my question is in reference to the projects. Are any of them including a community garden aspect, a cultural center aspect? Really, these are things that you know, being in meetings that in different meetings that community members have spoken about, and can those be carried forward? I actually am the one that asked about the difference between the DRI and the DRF, because I know the DRI is more like the infrastructure part, which is what Henry was referring to. But I really want to understand the difference between like what the DRF covers. Does that cover smaller projects that don't really pertain to infrastructure? I kind of, that's my understanding of it. So the initial question is community garden, cultural center, and things of that nature that really will be something for the residents here, as well as infrastructure, building on the waterfront and things of that nature that bring people in from outside. That's it. Thank you.
Got it. Okay. Yes, I can say that there are a couple of projects that I think speak to what you're interested in: community gardens, cultural center. There are projects that pertain to streetscaping, so beautifying the downtown area, not necessarily a community garden onto itself, but greening the community. And in addition to renovations to the community center, there is a project that was included in the DRI application to reboot the Museum in the Streets project. And so that could speak to you know, a rich cultural program for the village.
If I may just add to that, Catherine, people might be hearing rebuilding the community is a brick, like you know, enhancing, painting. Sure, that's part of it, but actually there are drawings that we did before the DRI application. We didn't know whether we were going to win the DRI or not. It was a long shot at best of beginning to have drawings about how to rethink the community center, entrances, exits, indoors, outdoors, green space, you know, kitchen, and really rethink the entire place for the 21st century. So I'm just hoping people aren't thinking that all it is with the community center is, you know, to fix the walls and paint and put new furniture. That is really almost a minor part of the re-engineering of the community center for the 21st century. Is really what's in the project, including a cultural piece to it.
Got it.
Either Mayor or Karen, would you also be able to speak to what the DRF is, as some people in the public attending may not know what that stands for or what that is?
I have no
I
idea
actually
what that
don't know
is.
what that is.
I don't know what the DRF is.
We have so many acronyms. I'm thinking
have
it
a-
might be something, but not to my
My
knowledge.
theory, Tamara, correct me if I'm wrong, my theory is that it's related to the Downtown Development Fund Council?
Tamara,
money-
what does the DRF stand for?
I think that she may not have the ability to unmute herself because she has asked her question. But maybe we could
okay.
ask her to put it in the chat, in the Q&A.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay. I do see that there was a follow-up to her question saying add on a permanent home for the Black History presentation, now temporarily at the Bethany Center. So that was a suggestion that we saw come in through through the chat. Right, and not looking for a community center, but a cultural center. Okay, so we have a couple of folks with hands raised. Should we, Alan, acknowledge perhaps Rob McCouch?
Sure, Rob McCouch. You should now have a command. There you go.
Yep. Hi, thanks. Hi, everyone, and thanks for taking the time to brief us on this. I guess going back to the DRI application that was put forward, the whole concept of the catalytic role of what we're doing came through very loudly and clearly. And I'm just wondering whether in the application review process, whether that catalytic aspect is going to be somehow, whether it's clear what the metrics are for the catalytic role, or is it sort of a faith-based, theory-based, build it and they will come, or is there a clear sense of that sort of virtuous cycle and how we're going to measure it in vetting the applications that come through? Thanks.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think part of what that speaks to is identifying a slate of projects that have synergy. And so I think that one of the goals is to not invest in projects that only meet one need, perhaps, whether that be transportation or housing or arts and culture, but instead to identify a slate of projects that have synergy and then could, together catalyze downtown revitalization. So I think that's part of what we're getting at, but the LPC will also be working to develop project selection criteria that are specific to Ossining and draw on the downtown profile and assessment, as well as past planning studies. Okay. All right, and taking a look to see if there are questions that we haven't yet addressed. It is a lot, so trying to work my way through.
I can make a suggestion, Catherine.
Sure,
is that
Alan.
we do have 2 hands raised. Perhaps we can get to those for the benefit of the folks in the audience. A hand raised is something we cannot capture after the meeting's over, but truly anything entered into the Q&A, while we might not get to it live, we do get a capture of it as part of the Zoom experience. So while we might not be able to address it, if you at least put it there, the team will see it. Hand raised, obviously we can't get to later. So maybe do 1 or 2 more text questions, then we can flip back and get the rest of the hands.
I would actually say that you do 1 more round of hands. Let's announce that now.
Sure.
Let people put that in. We will take them and we will conclude at some point so that we can finish at 8:15. So we're not in some sort of a big race. So let's get the hands up now. Let's get through it and be done with that aspect and move back to the Q&A where there are many more.
I do want to mention that the DRF is, I believe it is referenced in the application or in some of the materials. That is the revolving fund. So just to be real clear, the revolving fund, and I apologize, just didn't remember it off the top of my head, but one of my brighter colleagues texted me. The the revolving fund is an option that can be funded, and we did in our proposal, we did speak to this as a potential opportunity to be evaluated. The DRI allows for, I believe it's up to $600,000 to be placed in a revolving loan fund that would be managed, and that money could be used for facade improvements for local businesses. It is essentially a project of the DRI, so it is very separate from the DRI, but it is a project that could be applied for, and some communities have done that successfully.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I see 3 hands raised. Let's acknowledge each of those folks, and please try and limit your comments to 2 minutes. And we can start with Mark Fry.
Okay, Mark.
Good evening. My name is Mark Fry. I've been deeply involved with the waterfront for a long time, and now with something on Water Street. But when we had a community effort to prevent the Ossining Boat and Canoe Club from being essentially demolished after 100 years, the Village Pier project came up, and I'm no longer a member of the OBCC. I still have three boats, but not at the OBCC. At any event, there were some very serious issues in terms of the way that that project would impinge upon the mooring field of the OBCC. And it seems to have kind of died, but it's being resuscitated. But it's very important, I think, that the members of the OBCC and reached out to in order to get that input front and center. Likewise, down on Water Street, I am involved with a zoning issue there. And last time we met, I'd asked Yuri if she'd kindly put together the flyers and hand them out, and that was great. Flyers are produced, but I talked with everyone on Water Street tonight. Not a single person on Water Street received one of those flyers. So I appreciate the effort, but I've been involved in flyering for a long time, and there's a way to do it. You can, perhaps village manager can say, okay, we've got 1,000 flyers. How many we need for the churches, for the Hispanic Center, and so forth, to get the word out. And again, I think you're doing a great job on this, but I got 4 calls tonight trying to people getting into the virtual room and so forth, including one an hour and a half into this meeting. So while that's very clever technology, there are some of us who are adept with all kinds of wonderful, and many of us who are not. So I would say if you can simplify that, click here to join meeting, and the virtual room is pretty slick, but it's way above the heads of a lot of people I know. So again, great effort. My criticisms are just at the margin. Thanks.
So I really appreciate that, Mark. Thank you. The good news about this technology is that we opted to record all this, that simultaneously there is Spanish that maybe we are not hearing, but it's being done. To be clear, it's one of the first time I've been involved in any public meeting where the Spanish translations, I'm sure it's, there are flaws in everything, is actually being done simultaneously and available. So I hope that the 60 some odd people on this call, once this is recorded and up and running, will forward it to some of their friends. We will announce when the next meeting is, and hopefully that will be helpful. I'm in total agreement with you. I myself was a little bit late, so I was having a hard time. So we hear you, and we've said that a number of times, and we will try. But the positives of the technology is the recording, the ability for people to so quickly ask questions. For many people to ask questions in the old 2-3 years ago way, it often was dominated by 1 or 2 people who could speak the loudest and most eloquently, and others were not heard. So this gives more people an opportunity. So I'm loving some of the advantages. We are going to have to work on the ability to get on here more quickly, and then get the word out in traditional ways, as well as some of the the ways that we're doing it through social media, so that we can reach a wider group of people, deeper and wider. So I appreciate the input.
Thank you. All right, let's recognize Gail. Gail Marchica.
Okay, Gail is using an older version of Zoom, so I need to temporarily promote Gail to a panelist versus just permitting to talk. So Gail, you're going to see your screen flicker. You need to accept the request that's coming in, and then we'll temporarily have you as a panelist. Let's give that a second. Okay, Gail, you should have the ability to unmute your mic.
Hi, Ellen, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great, thanks. Thank you very much. I'm Gail Marchica, President of the Greater Ossining Chamber of Commerce, and I'd like to commend the village on doing a very good job as far as putting this all together. This easy task, getting everybody on, and I'm sure the kinks will be worked out as we move forward. We appreciate your effort in doing so. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. One, and to reiterate what the mayor had brought up earlier, is that many of these projects have been proposed and in creative form or an idea form for many, many years. There have been many studies done, especially with parking, which is one of our biggest problems downtown. And I'm sure that we're going to be able to work through some of those issues as part of this, because if we're going to create walkability and we're going to not only attract people here, but be able to accommodate our own citizens and even our students, our children, I think it's important for us to be able to not only walk through Ossining, the downtown area and the outer corridors, but if you're going to drive, to be able to park your car somewhere so then we can increase the level of walkability. And you see more when you walk. You spend more money when you walk, and will help to stimulate some of the businesses downtown and eventually reach out to the other corridors, business corridors. The chamber is willing to participate in any way possible. Please feel free to reach out to us. We could also be helpful in reaching businesses, both Spanish-speaking businesses as well as other businesses, as in we do have a great deal of participation and engagement within the community. And that would include getting maybe some of the word out to the churches and some of the nonprofit organizations as well. And with that, that's the end of my commentary, and I really look forward to this coming to fruition. It's going to be something else.
Thank you so much, Gail. Yeah, we really appreciate the effort to help get out the word. Thank you. Okay, and let's recognize the last person with a hand raised, Jason Salo.
Hi, this is actually Jessica Salo, his wife.
Oh, hi, Jessica.
Hi, I have a few questions because we're trying to bring foot traffic to this district right here in this outline. The village just sold, correct me if I'm wrong, the property, the DWP site at Water Street, which is a natural, I don't know, landscape, which would actually be an exceptional place to have a naturally occurring amphitheater, and would bring people to Ossining to have the ability to enjoy cultural resources, whether concerts or speakers, and also utilize the parking at the train station. And this also ties into the parking issue within Ossining with the new and updated parking, I don't even know how to describe it, whatever the new monitoring is for bringing us into the 21st century. Will that change the parking along Water Street? Oops, sorry.
Yeah, that's no problem. We can address the question that you've just asked about parking, and it sounds like you're responding to an earlier comment about an app where folks could more easily understand parking availability. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, cool. And then prior to that, I understand you made a comment about the DPW site and its possibility to be used as an amphitheater. My understanding is that it has been disposed of, and that enhancing that proposed project is one of the application projects for DRI funding.
So there will be a way to get it back, or are you saying that it's gone for good? Within the district, like the parameters of the project?
That the property was sold in order to do both brownfield cleanup that existed there from being a DPW site and to also make some changes because of some, it's on the waterfront, and it was sold because of a number of studies that proposed that affordable housing was something both the community at large wanted, and because it made sense to do affordable housing to add to the inventory of housing in Ossining for a number of years before that. Market rate housing was built to a great extent. And that is what the board, both this board and the previous board, voted on unanimously. And that is why that property is being redone into housing and parking. And it is being lifted up because of the rising water issues that was done through a Cornell study. And it is being connected to the Sing Sing Kill walkway to connect and make a walkability real by connecting the community center, the Sing Sing Kill, to the housing, to the parking, to the waterfront. When you do a tour and you look at this map, which some of us did, some of us were courageous enough on a very cold day to walk it, some of us took a van. The whole thing is actually within the boundary, is walkable. Part of it is what we discussed in that project, which Catherine was alluding to, more than alluding, stating, this project, there is a project within DRI that actually expands both the vertical park, making it a more educational piece, etc. There are pieces of it to actually expand the project for more green space. And there is a community piece inside the building because it was village owned, because it was sold to developer through the state of New York. The state of New York, not this group, another group is involved with that. There is community space that is also, I would not say up for grabs. I would say that there will be community engagement, which there was actually in the beginning before this was even approved. There'll be more for the community footage inside the building to be used in whatever way makes sense for the community when we get to that point. And there was a lot of community engagement. There were at least 6 public meetings about that initiative. That initiative might be chosen as part of the DRI to be expanded on. I mean, I think that's the way I would summarize it as best I can.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for that background. So we are at 8:15, and we want to be able to relieve our translators for the evening. I know that there are some comments in the chat that did not get answered. We will be producing a meeting summary together with the meeting record for tonight, the recording. We will also make available this wonderful mural board that Yuri has been diligently working on to capture the conversation. We had hoped to be able to summarize it for you all, but we'll include it with the meeting record and folks can take a look at it. I'm really excited to give it a read myself after having listened to this conversation. I think we'll need to
Catherine?
break there. Yes.
Catherine, I'm just going to add, I just want to make sure that we cover a couple things. I did go through and I tried to answer as many of the questions, the actual questions that I could in the chat, in the Q&A as we did, and then we'll be making sure we put together a Q&A from this, so that'll live online and you'll have that information. It is important, I think, to just reconvey the information about the open call for projects. So anyone who has an idea for a project or a project sponsor, we will be pushing out the information starting tomorrow. It is an application process. There are some criteria that need to be met in terms of the ability to sponsor the project, implement the project, and carry it through. So all of that information will be available, and we will push it out in as many ways as we can. to the degree that we can provide guidance and assistance, we will try to facilitate that, at least through the application process. And our friends at VHB will help us with that. But I think it's just really important that you look at the materials. If you have any questions, you can call the manager's office. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. And we look forward to seeing you all in future meetings and hopefully in person too. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you so much, Mayor Levin, Trustee White, Dr. Gordon, everyone who was able to join us here today, including Alan, Christy, Liz, and Cecilia too. Thank you all. Okay, have a good night, and we'll see you next time in mid-April.
Thanks, everyone.